Hello and welcome to Personable, a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best, enabling you to become the best that you can be. My name is HarveyBracken-Smith, and today I'm honoured to be joined by Tintin Smith. Tintin is a YouTuber with nearly 20,000 subscribers. He's the former head of YouTube for Ali Abdaal and the founder of the 100,000 YouTuber Academy. I'm incredibly excited to speak to Tintin today. He's given me some incredible advice for my own podcast in not just thinking about what does it mean to grow a brand and to get views and to get subscribers, but also how to translate that into a business. So Tintin, I wanted to get started off by asking you, how did you become the head of YouTube for Ali Abdaal?
Well, thanks, Harvey. I'm excited to chat. And the way I got started with that job was whilst I was working as a consultant in London. It was my first job out of uni as a graduate. I was sort of following Ali's content. Lots of people like him. And at the time, Ali was still reasonably kind of new to this like online business space. And Ali was one of the kind of like the first people to be really transparent about how much money he was making, how he was making his money, and kind of shining a light on this like online business thing. And I found it super interesting just kind of following his videos, how he was building his business whilst he was a doctor, and then also whilst he had quit his after he'd quit his job as a doctor. Anyway, I was following his videos. He convinced me to start my own YouTube channel, and so I did that whilst I was working as a consultant back in 2021. And then after a few months of making videos, I was kind of so obsessed by the whole online business thing, but also in particular the online education element. I think one thing I was always really interested in was working in education and working for an education-based company, and maybe even building my own education-based company at some point. And after a few months of making videos, I was so obsessed, I quit my consulting job, sort of into nothing, but I quit to kind of just stop going down this consulting path and try to redirect myself in the direction of the things I wanted to go towards, like education, like online business, a sort of more interesting path to me. And Ali kind of represented a lot of that stuff at that time. And then I quit for a few months. I was just kind of self-employed, doing random bits and bobs. I was doing some educational tutoring, and I was doing some random freelance jobs. I was still continuing to make these YouTube videos, and I was a bit sort of meandering until a job came up that I saw on Twitter that Ali had posted, and I applied for that job. Luckily, I managed to get into the team. This is halfway through 2022, and then I worked for Ali for 2.5 years. It was really a really amazing job, an amazing time. I didn't start off as the head of YouTube, but I got hired actually as a writer basically, and then over time the kind of team changed internally, and because I was really passionate about YouTube and had my own YouTube channel, then I kind of ended up in that position within the team.
I find it fascinating that we both share a similar background, having gone to Eton. And then then you went to a very good university, and then you became a consultant, sort of a similar path that I'm on, going to Eton, going to good university, and then kind of entering finance, and in your case, consultancy. Where do you think that was kind of initial switch in your head? I mean, I know you've mentioned Ali, but was there ever a moment in your childhood or teenage years that you would imagine you'd go into YouTube?
No, I never imagined I'd go into YouTube. I think I always had this sense of like the corporate world is a bit boring and stiff. Not that it necessarily actually is, and there are lots of amazing jobs that you can have. It was just this like feeling, neither of my parents work in the corporate world, and I kind of just always had this feeling of like, just to sort of sit behind a desk in a big like office floor and kind of like be sort of performative and only work for the money, which is typically what those jobs kind of represent. It's like people go into finance, consulting, or law or whatever, mainly for the money. Obviously they're interesting jobs as well, but like that's the kind of a large part of the narrative around them. And so as a teenager, I sort of thought about that, and that was never something that like particularly appealed to me. But then at university as well, I like very much continued having that kind of line of thinking. And I thought people who were just going into consulting or law or finance were just doing it for the money. I kind of had this like sense of like, is this it? Is this all we're doing, guys? Like, is this all this is what it's all about? It's just to like go get a job just to kind of make money rather than do something you're interested in. And so when I left university, I actually went and did a kind of year as a volunteer football coach for Arsenal. So I was part of their like community program kind of team for like almost a year. COVID kind of interrupted it, but it was this like program for like 20 kind of volunteer coaches, and we got to do all these amazing things, like go work in the Arsenal Academy and run all these different sessions around North London. And then whilst I was doing that, I was like, shit, well, I actually am gonna have to earn some money at some point. And that's kind of when I applied to do consulting and ended up getting that job. But I think, yeah, I always had it in I always had this idea of like, I want to do something more interesting than, or at least what was more interesting to me than a corporate job in a big company. But I think that was just very much personal to me. I think, and it's all about finding your own, your own journey and defining your own success and all that kind of stuff. And it was just, I think that was what interested me at the time. But yeah, there was never any sense that I really wanted to work in YouTube. The big thing for me was I had no idea what I wanted to do for a long time. So I still don't really. Throughout school, throughout university, I just had no idea what I wanted to do. I think the thought of just giving up on trying to figure out what I wanted to do and just going to like a finance job just because I didn't know, that felt a bit like I wasn't putting in enough effort to try and figure it out.
We're to look at a more traditional industry such as music, film, TV, and we think of all those individual roles. I mean, you mentioned you were a writer for Ali Abdaal. You can go into all of these different businesses and there's very specific roles within that. But it's, one thing to try and become an actor, which is incredibly hard, but it's also incredibly hard to break into these bigger industries. But with YouTube, you're not only the actor, you're also the producer, you're the writer, you're the editor, you're all of these different things together. I mean, the manager of the Sidemen, who's pretty popular on LinkedIn, often describes YouTube as the modern day Hollywood. And I would consider you as a trailblazer in the space, as someone that's gone from a more traditional space, but has actually got into the business of YouTube. And it's not just a thing as, go and achieve your dreams and do it for the love of the game. Of course it's that. But on top of it, it's becoming this multi-billion-dollar business where it's not just YouTube as a platform that's making money, but it's the creators, it's the business people, it's the producers, the editors, the writers. What do you see as the future of YouTube? How do you fit into it? And do you think other consultants and people from your peer group should also be looking at a career in YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's a big question. What's the future of YouTube? And I think the honest answer is it's very hard to know. Without AI, I think maybe it's simpler. I think with AI, it's genuinely quite tricky to know what will happen to these platforms as it becomes easier and easier to make AI content, and whether the supply of really good content just becomes so big because it just becomes easier to make low cost good videos with AI. But I think without it, which I think is helpful to think about what's the future of YouTube kind of without AI in the picture. I think the quality of just entertainment content and education content, which I think are the two big buckets on YouTube, the quality just continues to rise. People just get better at entertaining, people get better at education. I'm very much in the educational side of YouTube, where I work with educational YouTubers who teach stuff on their channels, and I like that because I think YouTube is the best free educational platform in the world. People all over the world, wherever they are, can come to YouTube to learn new things, and I think that's incredible. That's kind of part of going back to the thing I mentioned earlier about wanting to build an education-based business or be in the world of education. I'm very much committed to that side of YouTube. But then the part of YouTube that I think you kind of referenced there with the Sidemen and the manager of the Sidemen, Jordan, I think is who you're talking about. Is that the entertainment side of YouTube is just continuing to grow. More and more money is being reinvested into it, and it's the biggest streaming platform in the world. It's where most the largest percentage of streaming time goes, and I think that's only going to continue. I think the platform is only going to become bigger. More and more investment's going to go into it, and so I think more and more people will probably end up having careers either in YouTube or in social media in general. I think it's not just YouTube, but Instagram, TikTok, other online platforms are going to be very key parts of a lot of people's careers over the coming years, because they're just so influential. And I think YouTube is the leading platform in a few different ways. But yeah, I mean, as long as YouTube is around, I will likely be working in it. But yeah, it's very hard to know the future of the platform, to be honest. I think these things, the nature of these things is that they are quite temperamental. YouTube's now been around for 20 years, and so chances are it's going to continue leading the pack. But I think AI is a genuine kind of existential threat to these platforms, and so that is a big caveat. It's hard to know over the next 5 years what really happens, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge that YouTube and these platforms are facing is how to deal with it.
I think it may have been Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, but I think one of them is creating a platform that doesn't allow AI on it. So I was actually writing a LinkedIn post about this earlier. I think that there will be, the likes of, Sam Altman and ChatGPT encouraging AI content, but I think
Yeah.
there will also be a want and a need from consumers and from listeners and supporters and subscribers to have a human-made content. I think there's something
Yeah.
nice to know that a piece of content has been produced by a human being. The other part of that question, which you answered with regard to more people going into social media and working on the channels behind it, do you find that, as much as you're in the space, right, so you can kind of see this, but have you found that your peer group, the people that are working at consultancy firms or other top, more traditional firms, are they looking at the work you're doing and, are they thinking, oh, maybe I'd want to do that as well? Have you noticed a sort of change in the minds of your peer group?
Yeah, I think the careers in YouTube and social media have definitely like gained respect over the last like 5 years. Every now and then someone sends me an article which links, or a link to an article where the headline is like YouTube is the biggest streaming platform in the world, or like YouTube has the amount of revenue it's generated for creators over the past year or something like that, to kind of like let me know it's like, oh, YouTube's like a really big deal. And I'm like, yeah, I know YouTube's a really big deal.
Thank you.
And but it definitely has this kind of sense of, it's not yet a kind of respected, actually no, I think it is respected. But when I go to lots of like a I was at a wedding on the weekend, people ask me things like, are you still doing the YouTube thing? And it's like, I think the framing of that question is like, that it's like a kind of bit of a silly thing, but or maybe that's just how I interpret it. But then you kind of end up, if you're an actor or if you're in music, like these careers that have been around for a long time, you still get the same kind of like, are you still doing the acting thing, or are you still doing the music thing? So I think it's not even about like, it's about the nature of what people are trying to do in those spaces rather than like the industry themselves. I think the industries are very like established and there's like a big potential to build careers in them. But I think maybe it still represents like a little bit of a kind of like a pipe dream, to try and be successful in YouTube, or people think you're trying to be a YouTuber or stuff like that. But there's a lot more to it than just trying to like be a famous YouTuber.
I actually have a few different perspectives that I wanted to share on that. I'm not trying to pick on my dad, and he listens to all my episodes, so he's not going to be very happy with this. But I remember saying to him, I was like, Dad, this must have been like 2018, so it was pretty early on. I think it may have been Mr. Beast's video when he gave like $10,000 to a homeless man. Like it was, one of his big videos. I said, Dad, like there's this guy called Mr. Beast. He does these videos. He spends like tens of thousands, now millions on these videos. They get millions and millions of views. Like, I want to create a business doing something like that. He goes to me, he's like, Mr. Beast isn't a business. I'm like, no, they are. Like, they get sponsorship money and, they build these like insane productions. He's like, it's not a business, son. It's just this. And now I talk to my dad, and he's sending me every article of Mr. Beast, everything.
Really?
And he's actually, I'll talk to you about it afterwards. He's creating his own social media platform as well. So it's kind of funny how he changed.
Anything on that?
Yeah, well, it hasn't been released yet. So, coming out soon. But he initially thought it wasn't a business. Now it is. The other thing I was going to say is I think there's something interesting about how people think about industries. So you mentioned acting, for example. So there was a point in time in which people, even now, people look at acting and they're like, oh, I wouldn't do that. But then the minute they get a big role, it's like, oh, well done. That was the right choice. Or, with YouTube or with AI, when AI first came out, people were like, what is this? And now ChatGPT has 700 million weekly users, and people are like, oh, you have to get into AI. And it's like, no, you don't have to get into AI. It's too late to get into AI. It's the next big thing. So it's sort of this like forward-looking mindset. I think I wouldn't be doing it justice if I didn't dissect it a little bit before moving on to the business that you're in now. But I was wondering if we could dissect the business of Ali Abdaal's channel a little bit. Kind of an open-ended question. Some things you learned about his process, what it takes to make a good YouTube video, the business of YouTube, just generally like things that you learned working with Ali that you wouldn't know unless you kind of worked there.
So I think, I'm trying to think about what to go into. Well, I think the context of the business is that, and Ali's very public about this, the team size has always been between sort of 10 and 15 people. Full-time team members. I think at the moment it's actually about 10. Whilst I was there, it kind of went from like 13 up to 19, back down to 13, back up to 19, back down again. And so the kind of team size is around there. The revenue is like typically in the $5 million range. And it did grow a bit whilst I was there, and then it kind of like settled around that point. And I think in terms of like where that money comes from, typically like $1 million is from sponsorships across different platforms, so like YouTube, but also a little bit on Instagram, a little bit on like LinkedIn, maybe a little bit on like via email. And the majority of the rest of it comes from selling his own products, his own offers. So I think that was something that Ali kind of was very, well, it's something maybe he made more well known in the kind of educational YouTube space. That was one of the ways to really make money, was to really build a sustainable business, was to sell your own stuff, your own educational products. And the thing that Ali sold that really blew up his business was this thing called the Part-Time YouTuber Academy, where he would help people start and grow YouTube channels, which was a live cohort based thing to start with. It was kind of like 5-6 weeks, and he would run it a few times a year. And that was like, well, I mean, pretty much since it started in 2020 has been like a huge share of the revenue. And a lot of that comes from the way that is launched and sold is via email. So even though YouTube is the thing where people know Ali and people watch his videos, a big part of how these businesses work is that you end up collecting email subscribers via sharing kind of free guides and free cheat sheets and free like useful templates and things like that in your videos. And then people have to enter their email and their name and sign up to your email list to get it. That is where a lot of the revenue is driven. Like a lot of the revenue is driven through email in these online education businesses. And I think just that was definitely something that I was kind of like was new to me when I first joined. But ultimately, like the thing that I kind of realized was that Ali doesn't really know what he's doing. No one really knows what they're doing. And all you can really try and do is understand the people in his audience. Who are they? What do they really want? What are their dreams? What are their goals? What are their biggest problems in terms of achieving those goals? And try to build educational products that would help them get there. And ultimately, that's kind of all really education is like helping people do more of what they want to do and learn more about the things they want to learn about and achieve more of the things they want to achieve. And I think that's what I now help lots of educational YouTubers do, is like try and build offers for their audience that kind of feel aligned and will help them build their business. But yeah, does that help answer the question? Or is there anything else that you want to dig into in kind of Ali's business?
I think I might come back to Ali's business, but I'm really interested in that last point with regard to the offers and what you do now. The reason I'm so fascinated by that, because I remember Alex Hormozy talking about this, where he was like, I have a person that works with me and they only have 3,000 followers on Instagram and they're making $3 million. But I might have someone with 3 million subscribers and they're barely making any money. Could you explain a little bit? It seems quite obvious to me, but could you say a little bit about why that's the case? Why more followers doesn't necessarily mean more money, and also how YouTubers and creators should think about creating a course, product, whatever it may be, to monetize their channel?
Well, I think like at its most simple, it's just who are those followers? So if you've got 3,000 versus 3 million, you could have 3 million 15-year-olds and multimillionaires, and like it's just completely down to who are the people who have clicked the follow button on your profile. Like, is that just actually who are those people? And you know, someone like Mr. Beast, a huge percentage of his followers are going to be very young, and because a lot of the content that he makes is entertainment based, and a lot of his content will appeal to younger people, teenagers, kids, all that kind of stuff, all the people of those ages. And so the kind of content that you make attracts a certain type of person, and then that person ends up clicking the follow button. And so it just depends on who are those people that you attract. Obviously, if it's 3 million kids versus 3,000 like successful entrepreneurs or people with lots of money, kind of whatever bracket you put them in, whether they're like, could be 3,000 CEOs, could be 3,000 like entrepreneurs, it could be 3,000 billionaires, like, whatever it is. Obviously, it's people with more money, then it's potentially a more valuable audience than those 3,000 teenagers. So then it's not just the followers and who they are that allows you to build the business. It's then your ability to convert those people into customers and to be able to offer them the right thing. So in Mr. Beast's case, or someone who's got 3 million followers and they're all kids, you've got to figure out what is the right thing that I can offer or I can advertise to these people that they might then be interested in. So Mr. Beast obviously does like chocolate and drinks, and like often if he had to sponsor in his video, it's like some kind of gaming, like some kind of video game. But then let's say you have something like a following of 3,000 dentists. All of these dentists are like have their own successful practice just because you've made content around how to run like a successful dentistry business. You can then offer quite a specific service to those people via your Instagram potentially or your email list, where, you know, whatever you might want to offer. It could be some kind of dentist consulting. It could be some kind of specific service to help them actually run their practice, whatever it might be. You're going to be able, you're potentially able to, you're more able to offer a specific offer to a very specific type of person and have a really high conversion to those people. And so you can absolutely make lots more money with 3 million followers, but it's in your ability to monetize and convert this audience into a customer base as well. So it's not just more followers, more money, or even less. If you've got a more specific, smaller following, that you'll be able to make more money. It's a combination of like who's in the audience and how good are you at offering them the right thing and advertising the right things to them. In terms of like actually figuring out what to build or what to offer or how to make a course or all this kind of stuff, like ultimately it starts with audience research. So if you've got 3,000 followers or you've got 3 million, you've got to learn more about them. Who are they? Where are they right now? You can ask basic questions. Like, let's say you teach piano and you've got 3 million followers, like, you know, you just ask them like, are you beginner, intermediate, advanced? Where are you in the journey right now? This is what I always talk about to the people in my programs. Like, you've got to figure out where are your audience right now? Where do they want to be? And then what is stopping them making that transformation? Where are they now is point A? Where do they want to get to is point B? And what's stopping them going from A to B? And if you can really understand that, who's in your audience, where are they now, what do they really want, and then what's stopping them make that transformation, then you can start to build out the right offers for them. That's obviously very much in the educational side of things. If you've got an entertainment audience, then it's a slightly different kettle of fish. Like you might need to make to monetize is a bit trickier. Like you might need to make some physical merchandise like clothing or, you know, branded stuff, or you might need to make a chocolate bar like Mr. Beast. Yeah, the monetization routes are slightly trickier typically, and that's why you see a lot of entertainment channels reliant on sponsorships, because it's just hard to find the right products to offer them.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not like a Alex Hormozy over enthusiast. I'm not obsessed with what he does. In fact, I barely watch his videos, but I've just thought of another insight that he had, because I think he's quite good at sales and how he thinks about things.
Yeah, no, he's very good.
And it links back to your point. And someone was on a call with him and they were like, I charge people, you know, X amount of money, like, you know, $100, $200 to take them from this country in Europe to help them get a working visa in the UK. And let's say they're earning like $20,000 in the first country, but in the UK, they'll triple their salary to $60,000. And the guy speaking to Alex is like, I've only got, you know, I can only charge people $100 or $200 because it's all the money they have. And Alex was like, don't think about what they have now. Think about what you're enabling them to do to get to where they want to be. So how much money is it worth someone to go and triple their income from $20,000 to $60,000? That's not worth $200. That's worth $2,000 if you think about it. So it's not just about making them think what you have now and staying in that place, but you're kind of enabling them to get to where they want to be. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. On that point, with regard to building a business, we've talked about how to build it secondhand, right? So if you've got a dentistry business, you know, dentistry YouTube channel with 3,000 followers, and then you can go about building a business towards them, or, you know, education businesses, and, you know, maybe a tutoring business or course or whatever it may be. For someone that wants to build a content creation business as a career and as a business, what do you think they should think about in their creation? Should they just think about get views, make good videos, or do you think they should be thinking about the products and services that they want to create first? Like, how should the thinking start for someone that's starting from zero?
I think if you're starting from zero, thinking about the money is generally a bad idea, because typically when people come to like content creation, they're like, oh, I want to make some content. I want to kind of like, you know, build a little bit of an audience. You typically come to these platforms with the idea of like, oh, this would be fun to like, you know, figure out how to make content and make some like interesting stuff. I think the most important thing is that you, first of all, like learn the skills. You can't get anywhere if without kind of learning the skills of like making good content and learning how to do everything. It just takes a lot of effort to like figure out how to make something look good and sound good and just not feel like it's total amateur kind of crap. And it just takes time to kind of get to learn those skills, but then also just to have fun with it and to figure out like what do you like making, what do you like talking about, and what kind of content do you feel excited by making. I think if you come to it, if you come to, I mean, obviously it's very context dependent here, and we're talking quite very generally, but if you come to making content with the idea of like, oh, I really want to make money out of this, you just end up putting a lot of pressure on yourself. You don't have that much fun. You don't make content that's like that kind of interesting potentially. And if you have like no real business experience or expertise, it's just going to be a long road to actually making money out of it. Because ultimately, when you're making content, you're posting content, like you're running a little business. Like it's a very entrepreneurial endeavor. So if you have no background in kind of entrepreneurship, or you're just coming to making content, the main thing is just to figure out what you like making, have fun, look at other people whose content you resonate with, you like, try to kind of, riff on that, do your own version of that, just figure out what do you like making, and then the audience will kind of build itself, and then you can figure out how to monetize it. Yeah, so it depends on your skill level here of like entrepreneurship, because some people who have lots of experience in business and are very skilled entrepreneurs will come to these platforms and start making content very intentionally, because they know exactly the kind of audience they want to build, they know exactly the kind of people that they want to attract, and they know exactly how they're going to monetize the audience as well. So that's a very different approach. Someone like Alex Hormozi is a great example. Like when he started making content, he knew exactly why he was making the content, because he wanted to find more leads to build his business, but also because he wanted to build his brand in this space. And it was like, he's obviously couldn't have foreseen the whole journey, but there was a very clear kind of like, I want to make this kind of content to grow my business. Whereas if you're on the other end of the spectrum, you're like me, when you had a consulting job and you have no idea what kind of content you want to make, or like why you're even making content, then you just need to have fun and just learn the skills, explore, see if you make content that resonates with people.
How have you found actually going about implementing the right habits for content? Because something that I've learned is that it doesn't matter if you have a 1 million viewed video that gets seen by a ton of people. If you can only produce that once, you've got to be able to produce content X amount of weeks forever.
Yeah.
So what habits and systems do you have in place to be ahead of the game?
That's a very good question. I think the answer with content, a good way to think about it, I think, is to focus on the inputs and the systems behind making the content. This is not like a new take. It's not a hot take of it by any means. And this is a lot of this kind of stuff that I learned while working with Ali. But Ali's kind of approach was like, focus on, we had this story that we thought about a lot, which is the goose and the golden egg. Have you heard about this? The farmer with the goose and the golden egg. It's a sort of basic fable. Essentially, this farmer has a goose that lays golden eggs, and he starts selling the golden eggs in the marketplace to make a bunch of money. And he's like, wow, this is so amazing. Suddenly my goose is starting laying golden eggs, and I'm earning all this money. But then they kind of get a bit greedy, and they think that the goose has this massive store of gold inside of it. So they cut open the goose to try and find the gold, and there's no gold in there, and they've killed the goose that was laying these golden eggs. And so they then have no more golden eggs to sell, and so they stop being rich. And the kind of like takeaway from the story is look after the goose, and the golden eggs will look after themselves. And so when we were working in Ali's business, the golden eggs was the content. The golden eggs were the videos. If we looked after the goose, which was the system producing the golden eggs, the videos, then, that we were kind of, the golden eggs would look after themselves and the videos would just be produced. So we put a big focus on looking after Ali, keeping Ali happy, because he was a big part of the system, looking after like our production system, all the kind of different checklists that we had, all the different processes, from like going from idea to all the way to produce video on YouTube, and just really getting better at all the different kind of inputs and looking after the system rather than trying to think too much about the videos. And so I'm presumably you've got something similar for your podcast here. Like if you just think about like getting the episodes out, it doesn't actually help you that much like week to week. You need to think about like I need some kind of production system here where I need to reach out to guests continuously. I need to have a system for booking them in, for, actually recording the episodes, and I can just make each bit of that process better kind of week to week. But also making content continuously forever is just quite tricky. So like creatively, it's very demanding, and I think everyone needs to come up with their kind of own process for handling that and approaching it and being able to sustainably make content. I like to write quite a lot. So I kind of write quite a lot of emails and journal quite a lot. That helps me like stay creative and kind of in touch with what I'm doing. And in touch with like what I want to talk about. But yeah, I make a lot of YouTube videos, and it's even if the system is in a good place, it is still hard creatively to kind of make content every week. And I think that is part of the work. That is part of the journey that makes it tricky. So I don't think there's an easy answer to like, yeah, how to sustainably kind of how to just do it forever with no pain. You know, it's ultimately always going to involve some amount of challenge. Do you find that like running the podcast continuously every week is tricky?
Yeah, it definitely is. So, to be honest, at this point in time, I feel like I'm pretty on top of it. I mean, it's been 3.5 years since I started. And
Amazing.
when I first did it, I did my first episode in September 2022, didn't post it for 6 months.
Yeah.
Posted that in like March, did another episode in April, posted it in May, 2 in May, posted them in June. That's 4 episodes over 9 months, like nothing, right?
Yeah.
When I started at university in August 2023, I was like, if I want to grow this, I have to do one a week every week. So I did
Yeah.
one a week every week for 17 weeks straight. So I learned about consistency, I learned about
Yeah.
guests, researching, etc. And then I kind of been on and off. So again, I'd like stop and then start. But now since July, I've posted 3 to 5 episodes a week. So for like 4 or 5 months. And so I've
Wow.
been very like
3 to 5 a week.
yeah, and my following's got up a ton. I mean, I had I was looking earlier, I didn't really realize my subscriber, that's 18th of November today, my subscribers were about 450 this time last year. Now I'm at 1,800, and it's this sort of, like, you know, up a ton. I've had like 60,000
Amazing.
views in the past month. It really, I like
Yeah.
to think of something that keeps me going, and I'm definitely seeing it now, so it's less, you know, it's less of a fun analogy to think about. But I
Yeah.
like to think of like the compound like interest curve.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in terms of, like, it's pretty flat, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
and then it just kind of like steepens. So like the same work that you're doing has like a big effect over time. And there's that other one. It's like, have you ever seen the image of the miner going for gold, and he's
Yeah.
like just nearly there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mud in the way. So that's kind of like, they're like the two things I have in the back of my mind. I'm like, I'm just before the goal, I'm just
Yeah.
before the curve. And it really works, because now doing the same amount of work, instead of getting one video I get 10. Instead of getting one
Yeah.
subscriber a day, I get 10 or 20. And it's just really like, I don't know, I find that a very motivational thing, but you
Yeah.
have to really want it. Like you
Yeah.
spoke to me about this when we got a coffee about a year ago, and you were talking to me about the energy that you have. And, you know, if you have your energy going off to all different things like work and school and relationships and this business, you're only going to really receive X amount
Yeah.
of one unit of success. But you're saying to me, like, when you're fully aligned with what you're doing,
That's
in, like,
interesting. Yeah.
one thing, you're going to,
Did I show you that diagram?
you showed me that, you wrote it out.
That's so funny, because I've like really thought about that this year. I have, in the last year, I've probably told more people than I can remember about that diagram of like, yeah, kind of energy like splitting off into various directions, and then like one straight arrow. It's from the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And yeah, I think that is super powerful. But yeah, I completely agree. Content, I think, is a particularly good analogy for that, or it's a particularly good kind of example of like where the compound interest thing like really kicks in. Yeah, it's cool that you're seeing that. It's so fun to be on the other side of it, or to start to see that, like, oh, actually is a real thing. Like, if I just keep going, like, all my, like, I can't believe, you know, for like a year or 2 years, I had no idea. And now I'm actually like, you know, even if I stop now, I would know that like there is truth to that. And that is so powerful to like really understand. I had the exact same experience, just kind of like at various points over the last few years. And once you know that that's how it works, just like life in general, it just gives you all this like endless motivation to just keep going and try to do big things, because you're like, well, I'm not going to see results for a long time, but I know that, you know, if I just keep going, something will happen, you know.
It's almost about not tricking yourself, but just whether it's your energy thing or my thing with the, you know, the gold miner or the graph, whatever like mindset it is. It's a strong reason why I focus on like offering like philosophical insights on LinkedIn. For anyone else, it's, you know, it's cool for anyone else to listen and enjoy it, but I just like putting my thoughts out there. It's because when you're trying to build something great, you know, whether your course or your YouTube channel, for me, my podcasts, and you know, everything else I'm trying to do, you have to have some level of conviction and belief in what you're doing, that it will lead to something bigger than what you have today, because you can't see the results. You don't even know exactly what it will bring, right? I don't know if you could imagine that, you know, leaving your consulting job would have led you to tutoring, which would have led you to work for Ali, which would have led you to your own course. But something my parents say to me is like, put good things into the world and good things will happen. It's just kind of having this unwavering positive belief that like hard work and like taking a risk in a positive direction will yield positive returns. But if you're not actually putting in those yards, it's really hard to describe to someone, because it's like, well, if I do this work, am I guaranteed results? Well, no, you're not. But if you want to have the possibility to achieve it, you have to go on this path regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something you embody really well is, well, you really understand those principles. And I think whenever I see content from you on LinkedIn, I don't spend too much time on LinkedIn, but whenever I do, you pop up. And I always love to see it, because I know that you're doing it for like all the right reasons. I'm always so interested when I see your content and whatever you're writing about, because I know that you're doing it because you don't care if like one person sees it or 100 people see it, because I know that you just want to share something useful for at least one person. I know that you kind of you're doing it because you want to like consolidate your own thoughts and to like put stuff collect your own thoughts and put it into a little piece of writing. And I know that you're doing it because in 5 years' time, when you have a successful business, or you have like, let's say more on paper success, you can say, well, yeah, like I was putting in the hard yards on all those years ago when no one was watching. Like you can go back and you can see all the stuff I was doing. And I think there's a certain, like, I get a lot of joy out of that as well, when I'm like, yeah, like, I made all this content when no one was watching, and it was really tricky and it was really hard and quite embarrassing at times. And like, it's just nice to say that you did the thing. And I think like I have a lot of respect for the way that you approach kind of everything that you're doing, but especially the content stuff. You're just kind of like very relentless with it, and it's very cool to see. And I can only imagine all the cool stuff that will come if you just keep going.
I really appreciate that. And I think it's something that ties in quite strongly. I mean, I'm really fascinated about the idea of, the 3 million subscribers versus the 3,000 dentists or whatever it may be. And the reason I'm fascinated about that idea is when I started YouTube, and I think this is something you only really learn having created content in some capacity, is the value of an audience. You've spoken a lot about this in this podcast, but I kind of just thought that the only way to be successful in this field is more is better. More likes, more subscribers, more views, more shares. That's more sponsorship money, more success, right? But I've not only learned that success isn't just more money, more subscribers, whatever, like you can define success however you want. But on top of that, the value of your audience. So something that I realized is, so let's say I post on Instagram and I get 100,000 views. I found that no one, literally 0 people, would convert to my YouTube. But if I posted something on LinkedIn, it got 10,000 views. 2,000 of those people would go and watch a YouTube channel. So I could get a tenth of the amount of people on LinkedIn than Instagram, but I'm getting infinitely more amount of people. And even now, I've started to do these daily clips where I'm like, here's a thought of the day or whatever. And you might look, you're like, Harvey, these videos are crap. They're not cut well. Your idea is like interesting, but kind of goes on. And I'm like, yeah, but the 10 people that watch it, watch all of my podcasts, share all of my podcasts, tell their best friend's ex's mum about my podcast. And it's creating a kind of core audience. And I think that's something that's really important. On that idea, you've gone from managing a channel with Ali with millions of subscribers. You're still getting a lot of people sign up for his course, obviously, because he's got millions of followers. You've got your own channel with near 20,000 subscribers, and you've now made the $100,000 YouTube Academy. How does this fit in to your idea of the North Star? What you're working in now, do you have an ultimate goal? Do you have somewhere you want this to go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The North Star is actually potentially something I don't spend enough time thinking about. It's definitely something that I have thought a lot about in the past. But the kind of, actually, that's probably not true. I spend quite a lot of time thinking about why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I haven't actually got like a sort of a daily like note that I look at too much. But essentially, the mission is to live in a world where there's high quality free education for everyone, and that is partly because I benefited so massively from having a good education, but I also just think education philosophically is the thing that solves a lot of the world's problems over time. I think if you can bring it back to one thing, I think education, and a high quality education for kind of at all stages of life, but in particular in people's earlier years, is one of the best levers that we have to improve the world over time and to build a world that, we all find to be enjoyable and prosperous and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of like why I'm in this world of education. And I think I believe that there should be free, high quality education for everyone, everywhere. And at the moment, one of the best ways to get a high quality free education is online. And so I've just kind of ended up in this world of YouTube. It's not, I don't feel like I'm not trying to build what I think is the best free educational, software or like resource on the planet. I'm just like ended up in this position where I'm like, oh, I believe in this thing. I've sort of had this, like, I've ended up in this kind of like space of YouTube, which is like an amazing free educational platform. Like, what can I do in this space that aligns with my beliefs and aligns with like also what excites me and what I want to learn and the things that I actually want to do day to day, which are like, I want to build a business. I want to learn how to do that. I want to like make a good living for myself and for my like family. And I'm super interested by like what it takes to build a business and build an educational business as well. So all these kind of things, like, they marry up, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, which is running this kind of educational, it's a coaching program really, with a bunch of YouTubers, 45 to be specific. So I've got 45 kind of these like educational YouTubers, all with like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and helping them build their business in the space, because that's kind of what I helped Ali with. So that's where my sort of experience comes from. And that's my North Star is helping build this future where there is better free education for everyone. But these YouTubers who make these amazing videos and provide this free education, they need to sustain themselves. And so a big like way that they do that is by offering their own products and services for people who want to pay. Because in pretty much every audience, 90% of people don't really want to spend any money, but there's always like 10% who might, and then most of the revenue will come from like 1% of the audience who do want to spend some money. And so, and that's okay, I think. I like this world where, almost all the education is free, but then, a small percentage can pay for this like better experience, and that will also always be the case. So yeah, like I want to help all these YouTubers who are making these amazing videos and making this amazing education to help them build their businesses. And that's kind of my North Star, I think, at least at the moment. Maybe that's not how North Star works.
Yeah, I like to think about things similarly in that way. Harry Stebbings, who's a very big podcaster with the 20 VC podcast, as well as he's raised a $400 million fund. I think it's now an $800 million fund off the back of it. Says he hates the idea of visions, because if you kind of constrain yourself to a vision, he could never have imagined where he'd be in 2 years, 10 years time. So kind of fixing yourself to that. On the other hand, I actually do like envisioning where I could be. I like to have, pick where I want to be in 10 years and kind of create some path to achieve that, have some level of flexibility built in. But I think that, if I didn't go to a good university, that would have closed doors. If I didn't go to a good school, if I didn't get good grades, if I didn't spend time on this podcast, there's a low chance I would have met you, for example. Like, you've kind of got to put these systems in place to go about building things. But I kind of operate on a 3 to 6 month time horizon, I'd say, like getting guests in terms of like just semesters. I mean, I'm at university, so I kind of think about this half the year, what I want to build. I want to go into a bit more detail on the actual business side of the people you work with. So you mentioned you work with 45 people, and I'm sure that not only because of the experience you got working with Ali, but in terms of actually having exposure to 45 different YouTubers, 45 different audiences, 45 different models, just naturally you're going to pick up quite a lot of details. What do you think are some things that YouTubers that haven't had that same level of exposure, what are some common mistakes they make? What are some obvious things to you that they're not seeing about how to create a successful business on YouTube?
I think it's a very good question. And yeah, I'm sort of over time increasing my kind of surface area for learning across all these different businesses and YouTube channels. And I think that, there's the big picture stuff, which is like actually how to, your chances of making the most money. And so there is AdSense, affiliates, and sponsors, which are typically the kind of three routes that lots of people think about for making money on YouTube, especially sponsorships. So AdSense is the money that YouTube pays you when you get views, and affiliates is just, affiliate income through selling other brands stuff, and when you get like a commission of the sale. And then there's sponsorships as well, where you can do a little ad read or promotion of someone else's products. And those methods of making money are often what kind of bring people to the platforms in the first places, and they can be very lucrative, but you just typically need quite a lot of views to make money through them. And now on these platforms, you always need some amount of views. So, it's not like you don't need any views if you're doing something else, but you often need to sustain your business. You often need quite a lot of views to make money through sponsorships. But then not only that, you have to continue getting views to continue to make money. The views is the ultimate metric in your business. If you're monetizing through sponsorships, the more views you get, the more you can charge for, your kind of fees. But the less views you get, then the less sponsors want to pay you. So that's kind of like it's not a mistake at all to go after like a sponsorship based strategy, but it's just being aware of what that involves. It's just like consistently making a lot of content and trying to get as many views as possible. And for some people, that's the best strategy because they love making the content. They don't want to have to sell their own stuff or build their own stuff. And it actually makes a lot of sense. It's great for podcasts as well because podcasts don't lend themselves necessarily to like offering their own products really. So, the Diary of a CEO, like Stephen Bartlett does like sponsorship segments. Sometimes he owns the businesses, which is like a slightly different thing. But like ultimately he's just like, doing a sort of sponsor segment for a product, and that's how the Diary of a CEO kind of makes money. And also it's a big way that it makes money. So it's totally a legit strategy. But then if you are an educational YouTuber and you are ultimately teaching people how to make some kind of transformation, like let's say a good example is you get a software engineering job and then you start a YouTube channel teaching people how to get software engineering jobs, and you just make lots of videos all about that, then some of those people watching might want to pay to get your help directly and to either work with you as a coach or to kind of like, to pay for some course material, like a step-by-step guide, or like to join a community of other people looking for jobs, like all this kind of stuff. There are different ways that you can kind of monetize that desire to, get a software engineering job. And if you tried to monetize that audience through sponsorships, you might get somewhere. Maybe you'll make, lots of money, but you'll have a more efficient monetization vehicle, a more efficient business if you offer them something yourself, because in that scenario, you own 100% of the business. Whereas when I'm running a sponsorship, I don't own that business. I'm not getting all the income that's driven from the signups by that sponsorship. But if I offer my own coaching program, I own 100% of it. I can control the price point. I can control the kind of narrative around it. I can build a product that can outlast my YouTube audience as well. So that's the kind of general thinking behind like why it can make sense to offer your own stuff and to offer your own courses, coaching, whatever, is because if you just rely on sponsorships, you're kind of tied to one platform and it's a bit risky and you need to continue getting lots of views. But it's also super hard to build a good coaching program or a good course that like people want to buy and continue to buy for years to come. So they both have their own like advantages and disadvantages. Yeah, that's the kind of big picture stuff. But I'm happy to go into like, more specific mistakes that people make, if that's helpful.
I think just in the interest of time, I think perhaps I'll have to get you on for another podcast to talk more about the specific business.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask 5 sort of short answer questions to close out.
Okay.
The first of which being, I know I asked you this at the start of the podcast, but I'd love a material answer. Aside from AI, do you have a prediction on something big that you think we're going to see in YouTube or in the creation space in the next 5 to 10 years?
Aside from AI. I think a good way to think about this is sometimes instead of thinking about what's going to change, instead of thinking about what's not going to change. I've seen, do you know Morgan Housel? He's the author of The Psychology of Money. If you haven't read that book, you would absolutely love it.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's right up your street. Morgan Housel has a book called Same as Ever. And the book is all about the things that will never change. Because that's a big part of like the investing philosophy of Warren Buffett, of like Jeff Bezos. These guys, they talk about this idea of like people always think about what's going to change, but it's actually sometimes a lot easier to understand like what's not going to change. And if you understand what's not going to change, like humans will always be greedy, humans will always be X, Y, Z, humans will always have these flaws, then maybe you can make decisions off the back of that. Like Jeff Bezos talks about, one thing I know for sure about Amazon is that what's not going to change is people will always want it to be cheaper and faster, like in terms of delivery. And he's like, that means that we will invest extremely heavily into making Amazon a cheaper and faster experience for our customers. And that's extremely easy to kind of to like suddenly it makes it a lot clearer what he should invest into. Sorry, this is a super long-winded answer to what was supposed to be a very short question.
It's a good answer.
But so with YouTube or with these platforms, I think like a good way of thinking about it is what's not going to change. And I think with YouTube, what's not going to change is that I think it's going to continue to be the best place for like big content creators to come. I think it's going to continue to be the best content platform in like a kind of long form content platform, continue to have the biggest market share of streaming worldwide. And I think ultimately, potentially, in 10 years' time, YouTube might not look super different in the same way 10 years ago, YouTube, it's changed, but it ultimately doesn't look super different from how it did 10 years ago. And I think that's quite possible.
What is a question on that sort of notion of what's not going to change using the not? What is a question that I have not asked you on this podcast and that in your day-to-day life you're not asked enough that you'd like to talk more about?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer to it. Maybe something like I've been journaling a bit recently and like a bit more recently. And I just think about like potentially what the most powerful journaling prompts or like questions that you can ask yourself that will have a kind of unreasonable / outsized effect on your life. I feel like this is the kind of thing that you're quite into. It's like, what questions can you ask yourself that might change the course of your life because you haven't really thought about the answers properly. I don't actually have any particularly good ones to share right now. But like, I mean, I keep a list on my phone of like good journaling questions, just from where I kind of see them. But
can you whip one up? Can you?
Should we have a quick look? Let me get one. Very simple one. What's the biggest problem I have in my life right now? What would change if I solved it?
Do you know what I found really helpful that kind of links to that point? Someone commented this on my LinkedIn as if it was some like well-known thing, and I'm sure it is, but it really made me like think about it, because you think about the amount of like, so just like a step before that, you think about the amount of just like advice out there, right? There's a lot of advice.
Yeah.
A lot of things that like kind of just become generalized things. So then kind of like a subset of that, I like the idea of like, there's just advice, but then there's like advice you've actually used. So like, I think there's a difference between like, oh, use this.
Yeah.
Then, oh no, I use this in my life. And someone commented something along the lines of like, in a business, you have all these problems like hiring, whatever it may be, but like sales cures all. So basically, if the business is growing and it's doing sales, that kind of solves the problems. And I was thinking about this in my own life, right? A couple of days ago, I was pretty stressed out. I was like, my podcast isn't going well. Well, it's going well, but I was like, I haven't done my podcast stuff. I haven't seen my girlfriend. I haven't seen my family. Yeah. I'm stressed about work. Okay, what's going to make me happier? Getting this final essay done, and then I'm done. I did the essay, and now I'm way happier. Just your mind opens up. So have you got something similar in your life that, as of right now, or like this week or month, that if you did that one thing, that your mind would kind of free up a lot more?
An actual thing in my life right now that if I did, things would free up. Well, actually, one thing, a very recent thing that I've done that has had that impact is super generic, but is like start working out. Because not just start working out, I've actually hired a personal trainer. I've wanted to hire a personal trainer for like 5 years, and because I've just never been able to consistently get in the gym. It's just not something I particularly enjoy doing, but I'm now like loving it since I've got someone's help. And it's obviously like a bit privileged because you have to be able to afford to do that, and they can be quite expensive, but I've like decided to invest in that. And that has had like a disproportionate effect on my well-being, my sense of self-respect, my energy levels, my self-esteem in general. And I think it does go a long way, is like doing something to look after your body in particular. But if it wasn't that, the one thing that I think I do quite regularly that I do stand by quite a lot is meditation. It's just a very effective practice, I think, kind of like looking after your mind.
What if I was to ask someone in 100 years' time, how would you want to be described, and what would you want your legacy to be?
That I was, in my working life, I helped contribute to a better education system for everyone. And that in my personal life, that I was a sort of good friend, good father, and a good family member in general. And that I was, that kind of like a present, loving friend. I think that loving kind of like, person in people's lives. That would probably be the things I think about. I do occasionally think about those things. I'm quite like introspective, I guess, in that way. But yeah, I would probably separate it out like that in my working life and in my personal life. And is that a good answer?
It's a great answer. I always like it when people include the personal side as well, because often, particularly people in finance, they're so like their life is so intertwined with their career that they're
Yeah.
like more revenue, more shareholder value, and it's like yeah, like I love that, and like that's the career I want to pursue as well. But like you have family, like what impact do you want to have on them? And the other thing that I'd say is, it's kind of changing more now as I'm starting to grow audience, and kind of that's my goal: 10,000 subscribers for the end of the year. Keep
Nice.
ramping it up. And
Yeah.
one of my like you mentioned with your North Star you can add like 10 different things. One of my like 10th thing is that I want someone to be able to come back in 100 years time when YouTube's still around or whatever company has bought YouTube and be able to say, here was Tintin Smith, this was how this great thinker thought at this point in time, this is how this billionaire thought, this is how this founder thought, this is how this actress thought at this point in time. Let me see what the modern day Plato leader, CEO was at that time, and what principles and things are they thinking about, and how can I relate that into my own life. So I'm thinking very long term. So we'll see
That's
if
super long term. Yeah.
put in the comments below if you're listening in
Yeah.
2125.
Yeah.
That'd be quite funny. My last question is, and I ask this to every guest on Personable, is what is one thing that you would want a listener to take away from this episode?
From my personal story, I think most people, I'm like most people, which is that I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and I think most people don't really know what they want to do. And so far, the solution that I have kind of been working with is that's okay, and you design a life that you love kind of over time through step by step. I kind of like did this Arsenal coaching thing, then I did consulting, then I quit my job for a bit, then I worked for Ali, now I'm doing this. And I think if you just keep kind of exploring your interests, trying to marry up your interests, your skills, your talent, your financial requirements, all this kind of stuff, and over time design something that works for you, I think is a good philosophy. And a specific book recommendation on that is Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. I think that will leave the listeners of your podcast with a lot more insight than I've got to share. But yeah, I think that's like what my personal story is kind of maybe a good example of. It's just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just kind of like, I'm just trying to kind of like continue to embrace that philosophy and like tick the boxes of like what I think I'm good at, what I want to learn more about, what I'm excited by, and what kind of life I want to live. And I feel like you just keep kind of iterating on that.
We spoke about liberating things in terms of like, the month that we're in, the day that we're in, the week we're in. One of the biggest liberating things that I found in my life was, the society program at Eton, because you'd hear from, like, for those that don't know, 8:45 to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, hear from world famous speakers, past presidents, prime ministers, CEOs and founders of company, doctors, lawyers. So you kind of get these perspectives from these amazing people at our high school. And the reason I found that so insane is you look at someone like Sam Altman, or you look at Bill Gates or whoever it may be, and you think, oh wow, this person must be different. You almost think they're alien in a sense, that they've got some superpowers that make them who they are. But actually you see that they're flesh and blood. You see that they're only like 5'9", 5'10", or whatever height that they are. They're not like these mega giants in a spaceship, but it's just like that knowledge to know that, like, sure, they might be smart and sure they might have great connections, those two particular people, but like there are so many people from so many different backgrounds that maybe like you can do it too. Barack Obama has said something similar, in that he says that, he's met the most successful people on the planet and they're not as impressive as you think they are. Like everyone's going along, and I think that's a really powerful lesson.
Yeah.
Loved, learning more about your career. I think you're a trailblazer in the YouTube space. I think we'll be looking back, in 20, 30 years time, and this will be the norm. Whereas you're kind of like on the forefront of that. I like how you're building a purpose-built business. I really love the 3,000 versus 3 million subscriber thing in terms of how you actually think about building things. I like your approach to, you noticed Ali's most profitable or most revenue generating thing was a course. So you built your own course as well. You're very smart at thinking about what are the right things to focus on. And I also like that you were honest that your North Star is constantly evolving in what you're doing. But I feel like I learned a lot. I'm sure the listeners did as well. So thank you so much for coming on Personable today, Tintin.
Thank you very much, Harvey. It was a pleasure.